We made a quick reference to it, but can you describe the reality for journalists who are working on the ground in Afghanistan right now? I mean, the Taliban says all is normal for what it's worth.
Well, I think you would be hard pressed to find any woman journalist working right now in Afghanistan. We have been working for the last couple of weeks trying to get as many women journalists out of the country as possible. Was and continues to be a harrowing effort, and many of them did not make it out of the country. It's my understanding that most of them are in hiding. None of them that I'm aware of are going to work, and most of them are fearing a knock on their door. They fear for not only themselves, but also for their families.
One element is a fear of reprisal. Are reporters self-censoring themselves under the Taliban? There have been reports of journalists, destroying phones and things like that.
I think most people are trying to disassociate themselves from anything that had to do with Western media, certainly, or with any news media altogether. So I think most of the individuals who we continue to be in touch with are literally in hiding, and are just trying to get rid of any evidence possible, in addition to the fact that it's becoming very difficult to top off data on telephones. And so even communicating with these individuals is becoming more and more difficult.
Yeah, you make a great point there. So the One Free Press Coalition is now calling on different governments to help Afghan journalists, and you've published a list of 10 specific ways to do so. What's the common thread here?
Well, I think that the situation on the ground has changed so drastically that I wish that we could still be calling on foreign governments to help evacuate media workers out of Afghanistan, but I think that window has unfortunately closed. I think that we are now in a holding pattern, waiting to see what can be done in the long term, trying to, if at all possible, help support any of the journalists who remain in country with safe housing, supplies, funding, if we can get it to them, which is also extremely difficult. And, noting that many journalists did get out, and thank goodness that they did, but making sure that they are not forgotten and that they receive support, such as visa support. Many journalists who fled did not have passports. Some only fled with their identity cards. These journalists should not be stuck in refugee camps for years, that we owe it to them to get them visas and entry into third countries where they can start new lives.
For female Afghan journalists who had to evacuate and are now waiting to be resettled, who you kind of just mentioned there, what is the best way for them to continue to report on their country from abroad without compromising their safety? What advice do you have?
I think that's really difficult, and I think that a lot of organizations are going to have to figure out how to support continued reporting. And we know that it's possible because it's been done from other countries where the media has been shut down. So creating avenues for Afghan women journalists to report, getting the news out from inside of the country while making sure that their identities and those of their families are not compromised, I think should be a priority, because it really is going to be the only way that we're going to get real news out of that country.
Elisa, help us provide some context here, because the Taliban very clearly doesn't want women working in any capacity outside of the home. Explain to us what the world loses when there isn't original reporting or journalism produced by women, particularly in a country like Afghanistan that is undergoing cataclysmic change.
It's so hard to overstate how important it is to have women focused reporting, and especially in countries where access to women is so difficult, to have women reporters on the ground. So the fact that most women journalists, if not all women journalists, are no longer going to be able to work means that we are not going to be getting stories about half of the population of Afghanistan, their families, women and girls. The perspective that we will be getting will be, male-dominated, one-sided reporting.
Later in the show, we'll talk about the brave journalist who became the first female journalist to interview a spokesperson from the Taliban. She's left the channel, but Tolo News has become one of the most vital ways for the rest of the world to find out what's happening on the ground. Are you surprised that they're still being allowed to operate in the country?
I don't know if I'm surprised. I think Tolo News is just such an excellent example of an organization that has managed to work within the system and maintain its independence. I have so much respect for them, and they're incredibly brave journalists. And if anybody can do it, it's them. And I hope that they're able to continue. And I hope that they're able to continue to employ women journalists, because I know that if they can, they will.